The blood spatter on the white hospital wall didn't belong to any patient admitted that night. The 6-foot 8-inch, 280-pound man who had stormed into Presbyterian General with an assault rifle lay unconscious on the pristine floor, taken down by a single, precise strike from Maya Chen. The 5-foot 1-inch night nurse everyone called Shaky because her hands trembled when she held coffee cups. For 8 months, the staff had mocked her unsteady fingers, never knowing those same hands had once held a sniper rifle steady enough to make impossible shots across 2-mile distances in the mountains of Afghanistan. When 3 Marine helicopters landed 20 minutes later, the extraction team didn't ask for security or SWAT. They asked for one person. Where the hell is White Ghost? Hey everyone. Tell me in the comments what country you're watching from, and smash that subscribe button because this story about hidden strength will blow your mind. Maya Chen had perfected the art of being invisible at Presbyterian General Hospital in Denver. At barely over 5 feet tall and weighing maybe 105 pounds soaking wet, she moved through the emergency department like a shadow, her voice so quiet that doctors had to lean in to hear her speak. The other nurses had nicknamed her Shaky, because of the way her hands trembled when she performed even simple tasks, starting IVs, checking blood pressure, or just holding her morning coffee. What they saw as weakness was actually the result of a very specific type of nerve damage, the kind that came from spending 3 years as a Marine Scout sniper in some of the most dangerous terrain on Earth. The tremor in Maya's hands wasn't fear. It was the aftermath of countless hours spent in perfect stillness, her body locked in firing positions for up to 18 hours at a time, her nervous system permanently rewired by the demands of precision shooting under combat stress. The woman they mocked for shaking hands had once been Staff Sergeant Maya Chen, call sign White Ghost, holder of the record for the longest confirmed kill shot by a female Marine sniper. 2,847 meters in the Shah-e-Khat Valley. She had been declared killed in action 14 months ago, during a classified operation that had gone sideways, her death carefully staged to protect her from the enemies she had made during her years of eliminating high-value targets. Every morning when Maya arrived for her shift at Presbyterian General, she performed the same careful ritual of appearing weak and incompetent. She would let her hands shake visibly when reaching for supplies, speak in whispers that forced people to strain to hear her, and move with the hesitant, uncertain gait of someone who didn't belong in a high-stress medical environment. "Chen, move it!" The sharp voice of Dr. Victoria Lawson cut through the evening bustle of the emergency department. Doctor. Lawson was the kind of attending physician who had never met a nurse she couldn't find fault with. A woman who used her medical degree like a weapon to establish dominance over everyone around her. "I need those lab results from bed 7, and I needed them 5 minutes ago." Maya looked up from the supply cart she had been restocking, her dark eyes immediately dropping to avoid direct contact with Dr. Lawson's intimidating glare. "Yes, doctor. I'll get them right now," she said, her voice barely audible over the ambient noise of the emergency department. "Speak up, Chen," Dr. Lawson snapped, taking a step closer to loom over the smaller woman. "This is a trauma center, not a library. If you can't project your voice, maybe you should consider working somewhere quieter, like a morgue." Maya felt the familiar burn of shame in her cheeks, the same humiliation she had endured for 8 months of being treated like a liability by people who had never faced real danger in their lives. "I'm sorry, doctor. I'll do better." "Sorry doesn't save lives," Dr. Lawson replied coldly. "Competence does. Try to acquire some." As Dr. Lawson stalked away, Maya caught the sympathetic glances from some of the other nurses, mixed with the eye rolls and snickers from others who had grown tired of watching her get dressed down on a daily basis. She knew what they were all thinking. Why didn't she stand up for herself? Why didn't she fight back? What they didn't understand was that Maya Chen had already done enough fighting for several lifetimes. The tremor in her hands wasn't just nerve damage. It was her body's way of reminding her of every trigger she had pulled, every life she had taken from distances so great that her targets never even knew they were being hunted. She had come to Presbyterian General not to hide from who she was, but to find out if she could be something other than a killer. Maya gathered the lab results from bed 7, her hands shaking slightly as she organized the papers. Around her, the emergency department hummed with its usual controlled chaos. Nurses rushing between rooms, residents frantically checking orders, paramedics bringing in new patients from the Denver streets. It was a different kind of battlefield than what she was used to, but Maya had learned to find peace in the routine of civilian medical work. That peace was about to be shattered. The automatic doors at the emergency department entrance slid open with their usual pneumatic hiss, but the man who walked through them was unlike any patient Maya had seen during her 8 months at Presbyterian General. He was massive, easily 6 feet 8 inches and built like a professional athlete who had spent years lifting heavy things for a living. His clothes were dirty and torn, his face was unshaven, and his eyes held the kind of hollow desperation that Maya recognized from her time in combat zones. But it was what he carried in his hands that made Maya's blood run cold. An AR-15 style rifle, military configuration, with what looked like a fully loaded 30-round magazine. The man moved into the emergency department with purposeful strides, and Maya could see immediately that this wasn't random violence. This was someone with a specific mission, someone who had planned this moment carefully and was prepared to see it through to whatever end awaited. "Everybody stop what you're doing and listen to me," the man said, his voice carrying clearly across the department, despite the fact that he wasn't shouting. There was something about his tone, controlled, measured, absolutely certain, that made everyone freeze in place. "My name is James Morrison. My wife died in this hospital 3 days ago, and I want to talk to the people who killed her." Dr. Lawson, who had been reviewing charts at the nurses' station, looked up with the kind of authoritative expression she usually reserved for difficult patients or incompetent staff. "Sir, you need to put that weapon down immediately. This is a hospital, and—" "I know what this is," Morrison cut her off, raising the rifle so that it was clearly visible to everyone in the department. "This is the place where my wife spent her last 12 hours in agony because none of you people cared enough to actually help her." Maya felt her entire body tense, not with fear, but with recognition. She had seen this scenario before. Not in a hospital, but in villages in Afghanistan, where grieving family members had been recruited by insurgents to carry out attacks against American forces. The pattern was always the same: a legitimate grievance twisted into justification for violence. A desperate person pushed beyond their ability to cope rationally. But there was something else about Morrison that caught Maya's attention. Something in his stance and the way he held the rifle that suggested he had military training. He wasn't waving the weapon around wildly, or making the kind of amateur mistakes that would give someone an opportunity to disarm him. He was controlling the situation with the competence of someone who understood combat tactics. "Mr. Morrison," Dr. Lawson said, raising her hands in what she probably thought was a calming gesture. "I understand you're upset about your wife. If you put the weapon down, we can discuss." "We're not discussing anything," Morrison said firmly. "You people are going to listen while I tell you exactly what you did to Sarah. How you left her lying in bed sick for 4 hours while she screamed for help. How you ignored her when she told you something was wrong. How you let her die because you couldn't be bothered to care about one more patient." Maya's mind was racing, automatically cataloging details that her sniper training had burned into her subconscious. Morrison's weapon was loaded and ready to fire, but he was keeping his finger off the trigger, a sign of discipline that suggested military background. His positioning gave him clear sightlines to the entire emergency department, but he had positioned himself near the exit, which meant he was thinking about escape routes, rather than suicide by cop. Most importantly, his attention was focused entirely on Dr. Lawson and the other physicians. He was treating the nurses and support staff as non-threats, which meant Maya might be able to move without drawing his attention. "Security to the emergency department! Code Silver!" someone was saying over the PA system. But Maya knew that the hospital's elderly security guards would be no match for an armed man with Morrison's size and apparent training. "Turn that off," Morrison barked, gesturing toward the nurses' station where someone had triggered the alert. "No security, no police, no SWAT team. This is between me and the doctors who killed my wife." Maya found herself moving almost without conscious thought, not away from the danger like everyone else, but toward a position where she could better assess the tactical situation. Her 8 months of playing the frightened, incompetent nurse had given her an intimate knowledge of the emergency department's layout. Every door, every piece of equipment that could provide cover, every angle that would give a clear shot. "You," Morrison said suddenly, pointing the rifle directly at Dr. Lawson. "You were the attending physician when Sarah was admitted. You looked at her chart for maybe 30 seconds and decided she was drug-seeking. You didn't run tests. You didn't listen to her symptoms. You just wrote her off." Dr. Lawson's face had gone pale, but Maya could see her trying to maintain her professional composure. "Mr. Morrison, I remember your wife. We ran a full battery of tests." "You ran nothing." Morrison's control cracked for a moment, revealing the raw grief underneath his anger. "You gave her some Tylenol and told her to go home. She died 6 hours later of a pulmonary embolism that any competent doctor would have caught." Maya felt a chill of recognition. Sarah Morrison. She remembered the case. A middle-aged woman who had come in complaining of chest pain and shortness of breath, symptoms that could have indicated anything from anxiety to heart attack to blood clots. Dr. Lawson had indeed dismissed her quickly, attributing her symptoms to drug-seeking behavior without running the tests that might have revealed the blood clots that eventually killed her. It was the kind of medical negligence that happened more often than anyone wanted to admit. The kind of unconscious bias that led doctors to take some patients less seriously than others, based on their appearance, their insurance status, or their ability to articulate their symptoms in medical terminology. But regardless of the legitimacy of Morrison's grievance, Maya couldn't allow him to resolve it through violence. Too many innocent people were in the line of fire. "Mr. Morrison," Maya said softly, her voice barely carrying across the department. Morrison's head snapped toward the sound, his eyes scanning for the source. When his gaze found Maya, small, trembling, apparently harmless, his expression shifted to something almost like confusion. "What did you say?" Morrison asked. Maya took a careful step forward, her hands visibly shaking as she moved. To anyone watching, she looked like the most frightened person in the room. In reality, she was calculating distances, angles, and the precise movements that would be required to neutralize the threat without endangering the other people in the department. "I said I'm sorry for your loss," Maya repeated, her voice still barely above a whisper. "Sarah was a good person. She deserved better than what happened to her." Morrison's grip on the rifle loosened slightly, and Maya could see confusion warring with rage in his expression. "You knew her?" "I was her nurse," Maya said, taking another small step forward. She was now close enough to see the details of Morrison's weapon configuration, close enough to assess his exact positioning and stance. "I stayed with her as long as I could. She talked about you, about how much she loved you." "Then you know why I'm here," Morrison said, but some of the edge was leaving his voice. "You know why these people have to pay for what they did." "I know you're hurting," Maya said, continuing her careful approach. "I know the system failed Sarah, and I know you feel like violence is the only way to make that right. But Sarah wouldn't want this. She wouldn't want you to throw your life away on people who aren't worth it." Maya was now within 15 feet of Morrison, close enough to execute the takedown she had been planning, but still far enough away that he might have time to react if she moved too quickly or telegraphed her intentions. "You don't understand," Morrison said, his voice breaking slightly. "She was everything to me. 23 years of marriage. We were going to retire next year, travel, see our grandchildren grow up. These people took all of that away." "I do understand," Maya said, and for the first time since arriving at Presbyterian General, she allowed some of her real self to show through the facade. "I understand what it's like to lose someone you love because other people failed to do their job. I understand what it's like to want revenge so badly it feels like it's eating you alive." Morrison's eyes narrowed as he studied Maya more carefully. Something in her tone, in the way she was carrying herself, had changed. The trembling nurse was still there, but underneath it was something else, something harder and more dangerous. "Who are you?" Morrison asked. Maya smiled sadly. "I'm someone who learned that revenge doesn't bring them back. It just creates more ghosts." She moved then, crossing the final 15 feet between them faster than most people would have thought possible for someone her size. But Maya Chin hadn't survived 3 years as a Marine Scout sniper by being slow or hesitant when the moment for action arrived. Morrison started to raise his rifle, but Maya was already inside his reach. Her left hand struck his wrist with surgical precision, causing his grip to loosen and the barrel to swing away from any potential targets. Simultaneously, her right hand drove upward into the cluster of nerves just below his ribcage, a strike that would temporarily disable his breathing and balance. Morrison staggered backward, gasping for air, but Maya wasn't finished. She followed up with a precise strike to his carotid artery, cutting off blood flow to his brain for just long enough to send him into unconsciousness without causing permanent damage. The entire encounter lasted less than 3 seconds. One moment Morrison was in control of the situation with a loaded rifle. The next he was lying unconscious on the floor, while Maya calmly secured his weapon. The emergency department was dead silent, everyone staring at the small, shaking nurse who had just taken down a man twice her size with what looked like effortless precision. Dr. Lawson was the first to find her voice. "Chen, how did you... What just happened?" Maya looked down at Morrison's unconscious form, checking his pulse and breathing to make sure she hadn't caused any serious injury. "I neutralized the threat," she said simply. "You're a nurse," Dr. Lawson said weakly. "Where did you learn to do that?" Maya stood up, Morrison's rifle secured safely in her hands. For a moment, she seemed to be considering how to answer. Then she simply said, "I had a different job before this one." The sound of approaching helicopters began to echo through the emergency department, a deep thumping that was growing rapidly louder. Maya's head snapped up immediately, not with the startled reaction of someone surprised by unexpected noise, but with the instant alertness of someone who recognized military aircraft. "3 birds," she murmured to herself. "Probably Blackhawks. Full tactical insertion." Dr. Lawson stared at her. "How could you possibly know that?" Maya didn't answer. She was too busy listening to the sound patterns, identifying the number of aircraft and their probable configuration based on auditory signatures that most civilians would never be able to distinguish. The landing was not subtle. 3 Marine Corps helicopters touched down simultaneously in the hospital's main parking lot, their rotor wash sending debris flying in all directions and setting off car alarms throughout the area. The aircraft weren't medical evacuation birds. They were combat transports, carrying personnel who had come equipped for war. The emergency department's automatic doors were forced open, and tactical operators in full combat gear poured through the entrance. They moved with the fluid precision of elite soldiers, weapons at the ready, scanning for threats with the efficiency of a well-rehearsed operation. The lead operator, a weathered sergeant with the kind of face that had seen too many combat zones, spotted Maya immediately. He approached her with his weapon lowered but ready, his eyes taking in the scene. The unconscious Morrison, the secured rifle, the terrified hospital staff. "White Ghost?" he asked simply. Maya straightened to attention, 8 months of playing weak and frightened falling away like a discarded costume. "Present, Sergeant." "Ma'am, we've been looking for you for 14 months. Colonel Rodriguez is on the lead bird, and he's not happy about having to extract you from a civilian hospital." Maya glanced around the emergency department, looking at the faces of people she had worked alongside for 8 months. People who were now staring at her like they had never seen her before. "Extract me?" Maya asked. "I'm not going anywhere. I have patients to take care of." The sergeant's expression softened slightly. "Ma'am, with respect, your cover was blown the moment you took down that hostel. The people who think you're dead are going to figure out otherwise pretty quickly, and when they do, everyone in this hospital becomes a potential target." Maya felt the weight of that truth settling over her. She had known this moment would come eventually, but she had hoped for more time to figure out how to balance her old life with her new one. "What about him?" Maya asked, gesturing toward Morrison. "He's going to be fine," the sergeant assured her. "Clean takedown, textbook application of non-lethal force. He'll wake up in custody, but he's not seriously injured." Maya nodded, then turned to Dr. Lawson. The woman who had spent 8 months belittling her was now looking at her with something approaching awe. "Victoria," Maya said, using Dr. Lawson's first name for the first time. James Morrison was right about one thing. Sarah died because of medical negligence. Not malice, but negligence. You might want to think about that. Dr. Lawson's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. "White Ghost," the sergeant said gently. "We need to go. The longer we stay here, the more attention we draw to this facility." Maya Chen, also known as Staff Sergeant Chen, also known as White Ghost, took one last look around the emergency department that had been her home for 8 months. She had come here trying to escape from violence, but violence had found her anyway. "I need 5 minutes to change out of these scrubs," she said finally. "Ma'am, we brought your gear," the sergeant replied, indicating a tactical bag carried by one of the other operators. Maya smiled for the first time in months. Not the hesitant, apologetic expression she had worn as Shaky, but the confident grin of someone who was finally comfortable in her own skin again. "In that case, let's go home." As Maya walked toward the waiting helicopters, Dr. Lawson called after her. "Chen, your hands! They're not shaking anymore." Maya paused at the threshold of the emergency department, looking back over her shoulder. "They were never shaking from fear," she said simply. "They were shaking from trying so hard not to be what I really am." The mouse had never been weak. She had been the most dangerous predator in the room, carefully disguising herself as prey. Outside, as Maya climbed into the lead helicopter, Colonel Rodriguez was waiting with a mixture of relief and exasperation on his weathered face. 14 months, Sergeant," he said as the aircraft lifted off. 14 months of thinking you were dead while you played nurse." "It wasn't playing, sir," Maya replied, settling into her seat and accepting the tactical gear that would transform her back into White Ghost. "Those people saved lives every day. That's not something to dismiss." "Maybe not," Rodriguez conceded. "But we have a situation in Syria that requires your particular skill set. Intel suggests the same arms dealers who tried to kill you last year are back in business. We need someone who can reach out and touch them from a very long distance." Maya nodded as she began changing into her combat gear. The trembling hands that had embarrassed her for 8 months were now steady as steel as she handled her equipment with practiced familiarity. "How long?" she asked. 6 months, maybe a year. Long enough to clean up the mess and make sure they can't threaten you or anyone else again. Maya looked out the helicopter's window as Denver fell away beneath them. Somewhere down there, the staff at Presbyterian General was probably still trying to make sense of what they had witnessed. The frightened nurse they had pitied was actually one of the deadliest soldiers in the Marine Corps. But Maya knew something they didn't. Being deadly and being caring weren't mutually exclusive. The same hands that could eliminate targets from impossible distances could also comfort dying patients and start IVs with gentle precision. She would complete this mission, eliminate the threats that had forced her into hiding, and then make a choice about what kind of person she wanted to be going forward. But whatever she decided, she would never again pretend to be weaker than she was. The ghost was going back to war, but she was carrying something new with her. The knowledge that strength could be expressed in more ways than just violence, and that sometimes the greatest courage was found not in taking lives, but in saving them.